He bought the cheapest house in Texas for just $1. No one knew why. The paint was peeling, the porch was broken, and he never invited anyone inside. But when Keanu Reeves showed up at the door with tears in his eyes, the entire neighborhood realized they had missed something unimaginable. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Sycamore Street wasn't fancy, but it was home. Just off a stretch of cracked two-lane highway in rural Texas, it was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and the biggest events were Sunday barbecues and the annual pie contest at the county fairgrounds. The air smelled like dust diesel and mesquite smoke. People waved from porches, even if they didn't particularly like you. And the kids, well, they had to make their own fun. That's where 12-year-old Mia Thompson came in. Mia had grown up in the red brick house with white shutters 2 doors down from the old Benson place. Her dad, Mark, was a mechanic who ran a small shop out of a rusted metal barn on their lot. Her mom, Carla, worked the front desk at the only doctor's office in town. Mia was smart, restless, and always 2 steps ahead of whatever rule was supposed to keep her still. She had a wild curiosity that often got her grounded and a heart too big for her small frame. But lately, even she had grown bored. Nothing exciting ever happened on Sycamore Street. That changed the day the house at the end of the block was sold for $1. The Benson house had been empty for years. It leaned a little to one side, like it was tired of standing with paint peeling from its siding and a porch swing that creaked even when no wind blew. The roof sagged in the middle, and kids dared each other to run up and touch the front door before bolting away. Most people assumed it was condemned, but then, out of nowhere, a moving truck rolled in one Thursday morning. No one saw a for sale sign, no one saw a real estate agent, just a truck followed by a black vintage motorcycle, quiet as a whisper. Mia stood behind her mother, peeking through the lace curtains. "Mom, is that who I think it is?" Carla didn't answer right away. Her eyes squinted. "Looks like him," Mia gasped. "That's Keanu Reeves." Mark walked in from the garage, wiping his hands on a towel. "What's going on?" Carla turned to him, eyes still wide. "The Benson place. Someone moved in." "Yeah, about time. It's Keanu Reeves." Mark raised an eyebrow. "The movie guy?" "No, the alien from the basement," Mia said, rolling her eyes. "Yes, the movie guy." Mark stepped to the window. "Well, I'll be—" And there he was, Keanu Reeves, in jeans and a worn flannel shirt, unloading a couple of boxes from the back of the truck like it was no big deal. No assistance. No paparazzi. No signs he was anyone other than a man moving into a house that hadn't had working plumbing in years. Word spread faster than wildfire. By that afternoon, everyone on Sycamore Street knew who had moved in. Mrs. Dunley across the road baked a banana pudding just to welcome the neighbor. 2 teenagers rode their bikes past 6 times, each time slower than the last. But Keanu didn't seem to mind. He smiled, politely nodded when someone waved, and got to work fixing up the old house with his own 2 hands. Every morning at 7, he came out with a thermos of coffee and a quiet determination. And every night, he disappeared inside before the porch light came on. But he didn't talk much. He never joined the neighbors for lemonade on the porch. He declined Mrs. Dunley's pudding kindly. And he never seemed to take calls even when his phone buzzed from the tool belt clipped to his jeans. There were no construction crews, no fancy architects, just him. The town started whispering. Some said he was filming a movie in secret. Others thought he was hiding from Hollywood. But Mia didn't believe either of those things. She saw something different in his eyes, the one time he looked directly at her. Something quiet and heavy, like a story no one else was allowed to know. That night, while brushing her teeth, she leaned toward her window and looked out across the darkened street. Her eyes landed on the Benson house. It was completely still. No light in the front windows, no motion on the porch. Until suddenly, from the basement window, barely visible through the overgrown hedges, came a flicker of blue light. It pulsed once, then again. Mia froze, toothbrush hanging in her mouth. She pressed closer. It wasn't a flashlight. It wasn't the TV. It looked unnatural, like a soft electric glow fading in and out with no rhythm. Then it vanished, and the house returned to darkness. Mia's heart pounded. She stood motionless for a long time. She didn't believe in ghosts, not really. But something about that light didn't feel normal. It felt like a secret she was meant to see. The next morning at breakfast, she brought it up casually. "Did you guys see anything weird at the Benson place last night?" Her mom didn't even look up. "Nope. I think I saw a light. Blue in the basement." Her dad set down his coffee mug. "You mean someone finally turned the lights on? Maybe he's got power now." "No, it wasn't like that." Carla turned, frowning. "Mia, don't go spying. Whatever's going on in that house, it's none of our business. But what if—" "No buts." Mark said firmly, "Man wants privacy. He gets it. Leave him alone." Mia swallowed her curiosity, but it didn't go away. It simmered just beneath the surface, bubbling hotter every time she passed by that crooked old house. Something was down there. Something important. And Mia Thompson couldn't look away. The following evening, the air was heavy with that golden, late summer stillness. Crickets chirped under the porch, the sky a darkening canvas of burnt orange and deep violet. Mia sat cross-legged at the edge of her driveway, pretending to draw in her notebook. But her eyes never left the house across the street. Keanu had been outside earlier, hauling in what looked like old crates from the back of a dusty pickup. One of them had fallen, and when he picked it up, something metallic spilled out, silver tools maybe. But Mia noticed his hands trembling slightly as he gathered them, not from age or weakness, from something else. Nerves maybe, or grief. Now the house was quiet again. Shadows lengthened behind the lace curtains. The porch light remained off, then the light returned. It started the same as before, a subtle bluish flicker in the basement window. But this time it grew stronger. It swelled and pulsed soft like moonlight, but somehow sad. That's what struck her. The light didn't feel dangerous. It felt lonely. Mia stood. She took a few steps toward the edge of the lawn. The wind picked up, rustling the tree branches. She glanced back at her own porch. Her parents were inside watching TV. Carla's voice floated out from the living room, laughing at some sitcom. No one saw her slip across the street. She moved slowly, careful not to make a sound. The cracked sidewalk beneath her sneakers, the buzz of a moth circling the Benson porch light, everything felt magnified. Her heart thumped so loudly she feared it might give her away. When she reached the edge of the overgrown hedge, she crouched down low. From here, the basement window was partially visible. A web of ivy crawled up its frame, and the glass was cloudy. But the glow was unmistakable. It pulsed once, then again stronger now. She held her breath, leaning closer. Inside, a shadow moved. Mia's eyes widened. It wasn't Keanu. It was smaller, quicker. A child. She blinked, heart in her throat. The shadow flitted past again, stopping just short of the glass. For a moment, it almost looked like someone was watching her. Then the light snapped off. Gone. Darkness swallowed the basement once more. Mia stumbled backward, nearly falling onto the grass. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned. Keanu Reeves was standing on the porch, silent, still. He didn't speak. His expression wasn't angry. It was tired, wary. A sadness pooled behind his eyes, heavy as the night air. He didn't scold her. He didn't ask questions. He just looked at her for a long time. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind him. And Mia knew, whatever was happening in that basement, it wasn't something he wanted anyone else to see. Mia tried to keep her distance after that night. Her parents had already warned her not to snoop. Her mom had even scolded her gently the next morning when she noticed the grass on Mia's knees. But Mia didn't tell them what she'd seen. Not the flickering blue light, not the shadow, and definitely not the look on Keanu Reeves's face when he saw her standing there inches from his basement window. Still, curiosity clung to her like static. The next week passed slowly, each day hotter than the last. Her dad worked long hours at the auto shop, and her mom was juggling shifts at the diner. Carla was busy with high school drama and didn't care much about some weird actor across the street. But Mia kept watching, quietly, from the upstairs bedroom window with the little pair of binoculars she used for stargazing. That's when she saw him. It was just after sunset. The sky glowed peach and plum. The curtains in the attic window across the street had shifted slightly. At first, Mia thought it was just a draft, but then a pale hand reached up and adjusted the curtain, quick, small fingers. A boy's hand. Mia's breath caught. A face came into view. He looked about her age, maybe a little older. Messy, dark hair that curled at the ends, thin-framed glasses slipping down a narrow nose. His skin was pale, like he hadn't been outside in months. He didn't smile, just stared down at something in his lap, some kind of tablet with a glowing screen. His fingers danced across it rapidly. Mia adjusted her binoculars. She could just make out what he was working on, a 3D model of what looked like a satellite, detailed and technical, way beyond what most kids their age could pull off. Then suddenly, the curtain snapped shut. She sat back stunned. A boy, in the attic, alone. She hadn't seen him outside once, not playing, not walking, not even waving from the porch. The windows were always covered, the lights always dimmed. It was like whoever lived in that house wanted him to stay invisible. That night, her mind spun with questions. Was he Keanu's son, nephew? Some kid in trouble? If so, why hadn't anyone mentioned him? Why didn't the neighbors talk about him? Mr. and Mrs. Benton next door always gossiped about everything from whose lawn was too long to who forgot to return their Amazon packages. But no one had mentioned a boy, and something about the look in his eyes, Mia couldn't forget it. Not sad, not angry, frightened, as if he knew something no one else did. The next morning, Mia couldn't concentrate. At breakfast, she barely touched her cereal. Her mom noticed, but Mia just said she didn't sleep well. That wasn't a lie. Her head had been spinning all night. Who was the boy? Why hadn't she seen him before, and why did he look so afraid? After lunch, she grabbed a notebook and walked out to the front porch, pretending to doodle. In truth, her eyes kept drifting across the street. The house looked the same as always, quiet, shaded, closed off. But at exactly 3:15 p.m., the curtain in the attic twitched again. Just for a second. Her heart skipped. She bolted back inside, raced upstairs, and pointed her binoculars through the window again. Nothing. The curtain had stopped moving. The attic was dark. But this time she noticed something else. Keanu Reeves' car was gone. She'd seen it before, an old silver truck, dusty but dependable. It wasn't in the driveway now. Maybe he was out getting groceries or something. That meant the boy was alone. Mia waited. An hour passed. Then another. At 5 o'clock sharp, Keanu's truck pulled into the driveway. He stepped out with a paper grocery bag tucked under one arm. He didn't look tired. He didn't look angry. In fact, he smiled and waved at Mrs. Carter, who was walking her dog. Mia narrowed her eyes. He seemed normal. Too normal. Every time Keanu saw a neighbor, he was kind, soft-spoken. He helped Mr. Benton carry lumber 2 days ago. He brought brownies to Miss Dawson when her husband had surgery. But he never stayed long, never chatted more than necessary, never invited anyone inside. It was like he wanted to be seen as polite, but not known. That night, Mia watched from her window again, and that's when she saw it. The attic window glowed faint blue, just like the basement had days earlier. The same eerie light, steady but pulsing faintly. And in front of that glow, the boy was moving around, not just typing on a tablet this time. He was building something. Mia adjusted her binoculars and gasped. It wasn't just a satellite image on a screen. He had actual pieces, metal arms, wires, plastic dishes, and rods all fitted into a skeleton of some kind of model. His hands worked fast and steady, like he knew exactly what he was doing. She watched as he connected a small dish to the top of the structure and powered something on. A red LED blinked near the base. The satellite dish turned slightly on its own. It moved. That wasn't normal. That wasn't just a school project. Something was happening inside that attic. Something strange. something big. Mia's curiosity transformed into something else, unease, and a voice inside her whispered what she hadn't wanted to think. What if he isn't building that because he wants to? What if he's building it because he has to? For the next few days, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She kept her routine bike rides, helping her mom fold laundry, reading under the elm tree, but her eyes always wandered back across Sycamore Street. The attic curtains remained closed most of the day, except for brief moments when the glow returned. Each time it was that same pulsing blue, like a silent heartbeat in the dark. She saw the boy only twice more. Once sitting cross-legged with wires sprawled around him, and once pacing, his fingers clenched in fists at his sides. He looked anxious, as if he was running out of time. That second time, he turned abruptly toward the window, and for the briefest second, Mia swore he looked straight at her. But then the curtain dropped, and he was gone again. Her dreams grew restless. In one of them, she was trapped in the attic, surrounded by blinking lights and humming machines, the boy whispering something she couldn't understand. She woke with her heart racing and couldn't go back to sleep. On the 5th day, her mom noticed her staring again and gently asked what was going on. Mia shrugged, just wondering what it's like in there. Her mom looked at the house and frowned. Some things aren't ours to wonder about, sweetie, but what if someone needs help? Mia asked. Her mom set down her dish towel. Keanu Reeves is a nice man. He's been through a lot. People move to quiet places like this to heal, not to be investigated. Mia nodded, but the words didn't sit right. Healing didn't usually come with locked windows and scared boys hiding in attics. Later that evening, Keanu stood outside watering a row of wilting shrubs. Mia watched from behind the screen door. His movements were careful, deliberate. His shoulders a little hunched, like the world weighed more than it used to. And then she saw it again out of the corner of her eye. A flicker in the attic. Only this time the boy wasn't building. He was holding a sheet of paper up to the window. It was too far to read, but Mia could make out thick, black letters drawn in sharp, desperate strokes. She squinted. The boy tapped the glass once, then vanished. The paper dropped from view. The curtain closed. Mia's chest tightened. She didn't know what the note said, but something in her gut told her it wasn't a joke. That boy wasn't playing. He wasn't pretending. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. Whatever was happening in that house, the boy didn't want to be alone anymore. By the weekend, the whispers had begun to spread like wildfire. It started with Mrs. Benton, who had lived on Sycamore Street for 35 years and considered herself the unofficial mayor of the block. She'd seen strange flashes in the night sky, said she once heard a high-pitched humming coming from the house after midnight, claimed she saw Keanu walking out to the mailbox with gloves on during a 95-degree afternoon. That's when she started telling people he might be hiding something. "I'm not saying it's illegal," she whispered to Mrs. Carter at the grocery store, "but I've lived here long enough to know when something feels off. And that house, it doesn't feel right." Mrs. Carter, who'd once worked as a receptionist for the sheriff's office, nodded grimly. "It's that attic, and the way the boy never comes out. The boy." Word had spread there was a child in the house, though no one had seen him clearly. Some believed he was sick. Others said he was a recluse, maybe even dangerous. There were stories about Keanu once playing a scientist in a movie, and people half-joked that he was continuing the role in real life. But it didn't feel like a joke anymore. By Sunday afternoon, Mia's parents were sitting on the front porch, voices hushed but tense. She sat inside by the screen door pretending to read while listening. "He's probably just private," her mom said. "That doesn't make him dangerous." "Private is one thing, hiding a kid is another," her dad muttered. "What if the boy's not okay? What if something's wrong in there?" "We don't know anything, Caleb. It's just gossip. I don't like the look in Mia's eyes lately. She's been distracted, worried. This whole thing, it's not healthy." Her mom sighed. "Maybe we should just mind our own business. We're not the FBI." Mia's fingers tightened around her book. Later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the sky turned golden, she made a decision. She couldn't ignore the feeling in her chest anymore, the strange tightness that had been growing since she first saw the boy. He looked scared. He had asked for help, even if it wasn't in words. She had to do something. She crossed the street slowly, clutching a folded paper in her pocket. On it, she had written only one thing in thick black marker. "Are you okay?" She crept along the hedge line, keeping her head low. The attic window was open slightly, and the soft blue light flickered again. She held up the paper. Seconds passed. Then the curtain twitched. A hand appeared, the same pale fingers she'd seen before. They opened the curtain just enough for the boy's eyes to meet hers. He looked surprised, then scared, but he didn't close the curtain. He hesitated and nodded. Mia felt her heart pound in her ears as the boy peeked through the gap in the curtain. He was closer now than he'd ever been. Behind the glass, his expression flickered between confusion and fear. His mouth moved like he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. He glanced over his shoulder nervously. Mia raised her hand in a small wave. He didn't wave back, but he didn't move away either. Then carefully he lifted his own hand and pressed it against the window pane. Mia mirrored the gesture, her fingers hovering just opposite his. For a second, it felt like some kind of fragile bridge had formed between them, delicate but real. Suddenly, a sound shattered the moment. A door slammed somewhere inside the house. The boy flinched. His eyes widened in panic. He pulled the curtain shut in a single motion, and the light vanished. The attic went dark. Mia backed away quickly, nearly stumbling over a flower pot hidden in the overgrown grass. Her heart raced. She turned to run, only to freeze in her tracks. Keanu Reeves was standing at the corner of the house. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. But the look in his eyes was unmistakable, deep calm, and unmistakably serious. Mia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Keanu walked forward slowly, hands at his sides, his voice low and even. "You're Mia, right?" She nodded, her cheeks burning. He looked up at the attic window, then back at her. "I know you're curious," he said. "I understand. But some things, some people, they need time, space." Mia didn't respond. She felt like a balloon slowly deflating. Keanu's voice softened. "He's safe. That's all I can say. Please respect our privacy." Mia blinked, surprised by the warmth in his tone, despite the firmness of his words. She nodded again, barely whispering, "I'm sorry." Keanu offered a brief smile, tired, maybe even grateful, but didn't say anything more. He turned and walked toward the porch without looking back. Mia crossed the street as fast as she could without running. She slipped inside her house, her breath catching. Her parents were in the kitchen. Her dad looked up when he saw her face. "What happened?" Mia shook her head. "Nothing. I think I scared him." Her mom walked over and brushed her hair back. "You mean the boy?" Mia nodded, her throat tight. Neither parent asked more. But as the evening settled into quiet, an unspoken tension seemed to settle over the house and across the whole neighborhood. That night, the lights in the attic stayed off, and for the first time in days, the flickering blue glow never appeared. By the next morning, the mood on Sycamore Street had shifted. Mia sat on the porch swing, knees pulled to her chest, staring across at the old house. The curtains remained drawn. The porch light, usually on at dawn, was off. No sound came from inside. Even the mail sat untouched in the box. It was like the house had sealed itself shut. Her parents didn't say much over breakfast. Her dad drank his coffee without speaking, his brow furrowed. Her mom cleared the dishes with a little too much force, glancing out the window every few minutes. By noon, Mrs. Benton had already made another round of the block. This time, she was carrying a plate of lemon squares she hadn't baked herself. When she knocked on Keanu's door and no one answered, she stood there longer than usual, just long enough for others to notice. By late afternoon, the whispers were louder. "Something's wrong," one neighbor muttered. "He's avoiding everyone. That poor child in there. What if he's not safe?" Theories multiplied. Maybe the boy was being kept against his will. Maybe Keanu wasn't the hero everyone thought. Maybe Hollywood had changed him. No one had seen the boy clearly, except Mia, and she wasn't talking. At dinner, her parents sat her down. "We need to talk," her dad said gently. "Did you speak to the boy?" Mia hesitated. Sort of. Not really. He didn't say anything. Her mom leaned forward. Did he look hurt? Scared. Mia shook her head. He looked smart and lonely. Her dad frowned, and then Keanu came out. Mia nodded. He wasn't mean. He just said to respect their privacy. Silence stretched across the table. Then her mom said, I think we should call someone, not to get him in trouble, just to make sure everything's okay. No, Mia said quickly, surprising even herself. They both looked at her. I mean, what if that makes things worse? What if they leave? Her dad sighed. Honey, we can't just ignore this. The whole neighborhood's on edge. Mia looked down at her plate. Her voice dropped. I don't think he's in danger. I think he's hiding from something else. Her parents exchanged glances. Neither responded. Outside, the sky turned dark. A storm was rolling in from the west, thunder low in the distance. Lights flickered in the street lamps as wind curled through the trees. Inside the mysterious house, no light came on, not even in the attic. Mia couldn't explain why, but something in her chest felt heavier than before. Like whatever was behind those walls was bigger than gossip, bigger than curiosity. It felt like something important was about to break open, something none of them were ready for. The invitation came quietly without fanfare. A handwritten note slipped into the Carsons' mailbox just after sunset. It simply read, Dinner at 7. No pressure. Keanu. Mia's parents looked at each other with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. They debated it briefly, whether it was safe, whether it was smart, but curiosity and concern outweighed everything else. They agreed to go. When they arrived, the house looked different somehow. Still quiet, still unkempt, but something about the porch light glowing softly made it feel less mysterious, more like a place someone was trying to make a home again. Keanu opened the door himself. He wore a dark sweater and jeans, his hair tied loosely at the back. His face was calm, his voice warm. Thank you for coming. The dining room was small, but inviting. A simple wooden table was set with 4 plates. The meal smelled of garlic and rosemary homemade lasagna salad and fresh bread. Keanu poured water into glasses himself. No assistants, no pretenses. For a while they just ate. Small talk floated between bites. The weather, the town's farmer's market, old buildings needing repair. But the air was thick with unspoken questions. When the plates were cleared and the tea was poured, Keanu sat down again, folding his hands. I think you deserve to know why we're here, he said, looking from Mia's dad to her mom, then briefly to Mia herself. My friend Luciana, she's dying. The words hung in the room like fog. She's a documentary filmmaker. Brilliant. Fierce. We worked together years ago on a project in Cambodia, exposing child labor in illegal factories. She never backed down from anything. But now... His voice faltered just slightly. Now she has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She didn't tell anyone for months. I only found out when she collapsed at a festival in Montreal. Mia's mom reached for her tea but didn't drink. Keanu continued more slowly now. Luciana has a son, Luca. He's 12, and he's different. The room quieted even more. He's brilliant, Keanu said, his voice soft. An actual prodigy, math, languages, music, you name it. But he also has PTSD, severe social anxiety. He doesn't talk to strangers. Loud sounds make him panic. Crowds terrify him. He hasn't been the same since what happened when he was 8. What happened? Mia asked quietly. Keanu's eyes dropped to the table. Luciana's last documentary angered some powerful people in Eastern Europe. Their family was targeted. Luca was with her during one of the attacks. A car bomb meant for her went off too early. He saw too much. No one said a word. Keanu finally met their eyes again. She asked me not to put him into the system. She wanted someone she trusted, someone who'd protect him from the circus of headlines and cameras. So we left, quietly. We've been moving ever since. Keanu paused, letting the weight of his words settle. I didn't want to lie to anyone, he said gently, but I couldn't explain everything either, not without putting Luca or Luciana in the spotlight again. The media can twist even kindness into a headline. That's why we came here. This house, this place, it was supposed to be quiet. Mia's dad cleared his throat. But the house, it was all over the news. Bought for $1. People think it's strange. Keanu gave a faint smile. Yeah, I figured that might raise eyebrows, but it wasn't a stunt. It was symbolic. The house was abandoned. Condemned, actually. The county offered it to me for $1 as part of a community restoration program. I accepted. Not to hide, but to rebuild. For Luca. For Luciana. For something that didn't feel temporary. He leaned back in his chair. Luca hasn't had a home in years. Not really. Always running. Always watching. This place, it's not perfect, but it's ours. For now. Mia's mom softened. Why here? This town. Because no one expects a movie star to live here, Keanu said simply. Because it's quiet, and because people still look each other in the eye. That matters. Mia looked down, remembering the fear in Luca's face when she startled him. I didn't mean to scare him, she whispered. You didn't, Keanu said kindly. He just doesn't know how to process kindness from strangers yet. He's used to people taking photos, whispering, pointing. He thought you were one of them. He said his name, Mia added. That was the only thing. Then he ran. Keanu nodded. That's more than most people get. He stood and walked to a side table, pulling open a drawer. He returned with a small leather notebook. He placed it on the table and opened it to a page filled with scribbles, drawings of shapes, formulas, notes in different languages. It looked like the mind of a genius trapped in a storm. Luca journals everything, Keanu explained. It helps calm him. He sees patterns in everything, whether music, shadows. He's not broken, just wired differently. But school never worked. The therapists kept trying to label him. Luciana and I decided to give him time instead of more diagnoses. Mia's father looked at the notebook, stunned. This is incredible. Keanu closed the book gently. He's not ready for the world, not yet. But he's trying. That's why I asked you not to tell anyone. No cameras, no gossip. Just let us exist. There was silence again, but it was no longer tense, just full of understanding. Mia's mom leaned forward. How long does Luciana have? Keanu's face changed, slightly calm, but shadowed with quiet sorrow. A few months, maybe less. She's in a hospice facility nearby under a different name. No press, no visits. Her only request was that Luca be allowed to grow without being defined by her death. He took a breath. She asked me to be there for him, not as a replacement father, just as someone who wouldn't give up on him. Mia's dad nodded slowly. That's a heavy promise. Keanu met his gaze. It is, but I owe her more than I can repay. Years ago, during filming, I was in a bad place. Lost. Angry. Luciana wasn't just a stunt coordinator. She was the one person who told me to stop pretending I was okay. She saved me. He let that truth settle in the room before continuing. So now I'm here, doing the same for her son. Outside, a soft wind passed through the trees as if nature itself was listening. I know people talk, Keanu continued. They always will. But Luca doesn't need to be a mystery. He just needs space, and people who don't see him as a headline. Mia turned to her parents. He's just a kid, a scared one. I saw it in his eyes. He's not dangerous. No. Keanu agreed, his voice gentle. He's brilliant, kind. But life hasn't been kind to him. I'm just trying to change that one quiet day at a time. Her dad exhaled and nodded. You've got our word. We won't say anything. And if anyone asks, we'll tell them to mind their business. A small smile returned to Keanu's face. Thank you. He stood up, then paused. If Luca ever wants to talk, Mia said softly, I'll be there. I won't push. Keanu's eyes glinted with something between surprise and gratitude. That might mean more than you know. With that, he walked them to the door. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, the quiet of the neighborhood seemed different now, less mysterious, more human. Back inside the porch, light turned off, but the weight that had hovered over the strange house at the end of the block had begun to lift just a little, and across town, Whispers still swirled. But now, for the first time, the truth had a heartbeat. The first visit was quiet. Keanu walked Mia across the lawn one overcast afternoon, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. He didn't speak much, just nodded when she looked up at him nervously. As they approached the house, Mia saw the curtains twitch, and the front door opened just slightly before Keanu gently pushed it the rest of the way. Inside, the air was still, and a faint scent of cedar lingered. Luca was seated at a large table covered with scattered parts, wires, gears, a circuit board, and what looked like a broken piece of an old telescope. He didn't look up when they entered. Keanu said softly, "This is Mia." The boy glanced up, eyes scanning her with a mixture of calculation and fear. He gave a small nod, barely perceptible. Mia held her breath. The tension in the room felt like walking across thin ice. Keanu smiled faintly. "I'll be in the kitchen," he said, then turned and left them alone. Mia stood frozen at the edge of the room, her tote bag clutched tightly in both hands. Inside, she had brought something just in case. Slowly, she knelt and unzipped it. "I brought books," she said, her voice tentative. Luca turned slightly, just enough to glance at the spines. She laid them out on the carpet, like cards, one on coding, one on spaceflight history, and one on quantum mechanics. She had gone to the town library the day before and asked the librarian for the best they had. Luca blinked. His hand hovered over one title, but didn't touch it. His voice was barely above a whisper. "The orbital mechanics one." "That's old, but good." Mia's heart skipped a beat. He had spoken, and he wasn't dismissive. She slid it toward him and sat on the floor, legs crossed, trying not to breathe too loudly. "I haven't read it yet," she offered, "but I figured you might like it." Luca studied her again, his dark eyes flickering between suspicion and curiosity. "Do you like space?" "I like asking questions," she replied, shrugging. "Space has a lot of those." A long silence settled again. Then, without looking at her, Luca gestured toward the work table. "That's the second iteration. The first one failed thermal vacuum testing." Mia blinked. "Wait, what?" He finally turned to her more directly this time and pointed to what she'd thought was a pile of junk. But as he began to explain, the pieces started to come together. What looked like broken toys and hardware store scraps were actually components of a functional satellite prototype, and he was building it from scratch. Mia leaned in, drawn by the excitement in his voice, faint but growing. He described his plans, how he'd written the control code from scratch, how he'd solved a balance issue using fishing weights and copper wire, and how he'd mapped low-orbit rotation speeds using custom simulations. She didn't understand everything, but she listened like it mattered. And that was when it happened. For the first time, Luca smiled. The next visit came 3 days later. Mia had waited anxiously, not wanting to seem pushy. But when Keanu called her and said, "He asked if you were coming back," her heart jumped. This time, she brought something different. A small box of tools from her dad's garage. Not expensive or high-tech, just simple things, a soldering iron, pliers, a multimeter. She figured Luca might already have everything, but she wanted to contribute. When she walked in, Luca was at the window watching the trees sway in the afternoon breeze. He didn't speak at first, but when she placed the toolbox on the table, he glanced over, then silently stepped forward and opened it. "These are decent," he mumbled, sorting through them. "This one's better than mine." She smiled. "It's yours. All of it." He paused. Then, still not meeting her eyes, muttered, "Thanks." Mia sat down near the edge of the room again, not wanting to disrupt his space. But this time, Luca motioned toward the second chair. It was dusty, unused. She took the invitation. He pulled up a large sheet of paper from under a book, unfolded it carefully, and revealed a hand-drawn blueprint. At first glance, it looked like chaos lines, loops, scribbles. But then she saw the logic. It was the inner wiring diagram of a communication relay system. "I'm trying to replicate a simplified version of a TDRS unit," he explained, "but I don't have access to the right microcontrollers. So I'm using 3 Raspberry Pi boards in parallel, but the voltage draw gets unstable." Mia leaned in, following his finger as he traced the connections. Can you trick it into stabilizing with a delay script? Like have each board fire in a microsecond offset loop? Luca looked up sharply. She wasn't sure if he was offended or impressed, but then he said, that might actually work. And for the next hour, they worked side by side. Luca had a cautious rhythm to the way he built deliberate, methodical, almost ritualistic. Mia didn't try to take over or speed him up. She asked questions when she didn't understand, made observations when she did. By the time Keanu poked his head in to say it was getting late, both of them were elbow deep in wires and code, the room now filled with the quiet buzz of shared focus. As Mia packed up to leave, she turned and looked back at Luca. He stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, the other holding the schematic they had worked on. His expression was unreadable. "Will you be back?" he asked quietly. Mia grinned. "Only if you promise to teach me more." He nodded once, and Mia could have sworn his shoulders relaxed just a little. Over the next few weeks, a rhythm took hold. Mia would visit twice a week, sometimes after school, sometimes on quiet weekend mornings. She always brought something small, a book, a new screwdriver set, a homemade sandwich she was proud of. But more than anything, she brought curiosity. And that's what Luca started to trust. At first, their conversations remained strictly technical. Luca explained orbital paths, how satellites communicated using phased array antennas, and how temperature affected different circuitry at high altitudes. He was like a walking encyclopedia, but with none of the arrogance Mia had seen in smart kids at school. She never teased him, never interrupted. When she didn't understand something, she asked him to explain it again. When he struggled to find words, she gave him time. And when he got excited about something, when his hands moved quickly as he sketched out a new idea or pulled out a prototype board, she leaned in, eyes wide, fully present. That changed everything. One rainy afternoon, Luca pulled out a long metal frame from under his bed. It was narrow, no longer than a skateboard, and loaded with sensors, wires, and modules. At the center was a tiny camera attached to a rotating motor. "This is the beta version of the CubeSat I want to launch," he said. "It's not to scale, but it's functional. I'm testing navigation protocols and solar efficiency." Mia blinked. "Wait, this whole thing works?" mostly Luca said. Then for the first time since they met, he gave a short, crooked smile. "But it gets hot, like dangerously hot. Last time I powered it for more than 2 minutes, I almost fried the power regulation chip." Mia laughed. "Then let's give it a cooling fan. I have one in my old Xbox. I can bring it next time." He nodded again, then added softly, "That'd be great." They sat on the floor, legs crossed, going over the wiring. The rain tapped gently against the window, and for a few moments, the world outside disappeared. Then, without warning, Luca grew quiet. He stared at one of the modules for a long time, unmoving. Mia noticed. "Hey," she said gently. "You okay?" He hesitated. "My mom used to help me solder. She'd hold the wire while I worked, even when her hands started shaking." Mia didn't respond right away. She let the silence settle between them. "I miss her," Luca finally whispered. Mia reached over, not dramatically, just a soft touch on his wrist. "I think she'd be proud of what you're building, and I'm glad I get to help." He looked at her, then eyes full of something unspoken. Gratitude, grief, hope. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a ghost trapped behind locked doors. He felt seen, and Mia in that moment understood something deeper than facts or formulas. Luca wasn't just smart, he was surviving. Quietly, painfully, brilliantly, and all he really needed was someone who didn't walk away. Luciana's eyes had dulled since Mia last saw her. Her skin was pale, her movement slower, and even the warm glow of the sunlit porch couldn't mask the toll her illness was taking. Yet there was still a grace in how she carried herself, a soft smile that welcomed Mia as if she were family. Keanu opened the screen door for Mia, nodding gently. "She's having a good day," he said. "She asked for you." Mia stepped inside the quiet house, carrying a small basket of lemon muffins her mother had baked. The scent wafted through the hallway as she made her way to the back room where Luciana was sitting upright, in a cushioned armchair wrapped in a light wool blanket. Books surrounded her. Some were on particle physics. Others were poetry collections, all bookmarked and worn. Luciana smiled weakly when she saw her. "You brought sunshine, Mia," she whispered, her voice thin but still melodic. Mia knelt beside her. "And muffins, the lemon ones you liked last time." Luciana chuckled, her chest rising slowly. "Ah, perfect. I'll have one after I rest a bit, but first, I need to tell you something." Mia's heart tightened. Luciana reached out and gently took her hand. Her fingers were cool but steady. "I don't know how much time I have left," she said. "Some days I feel like the tide is pulling me back and there's nothing I can do. But I don't fear death, Mia. I only worry about what I'll leave behind." Mia stayed silent, unsure if she should respond. Luciana looked her straight in the eyes. "My son, he's brilliant, you know that. But he's also frightened. Of people, of life. He's been through more than I wish on anyone, and he's sheltered himself in numbers and stars to feel safe. But I don't want him to live in fear forever. Before I go, I want him to have at least one real friend." Mia's throat caught. "He has me." Luciana smiled, tears forming. "Yes. And you've helped him more than you know, but he needs to see. The world isn't all danger and rejection. I want him to experience the warmth of friendship beyond just one person. A shared laugh, a late-night memory. I want him to know that even in the chaos, there is joy." Mia blinked back her own tears. "There's someone I think he might get along with. My best friend Jordan. He's kind, thoughtful, and he's not the kind of person to pressure anyone. Would it be okay if I brought him over?" Luciana nodded, her smile softening. That would mean everything. Mia squeezed her hand, feeling the frailty in it, and promised herself silently that she would make this happen. The next weekend, Mia returned to the house on the hill this time, with Jordan beside her. He stood awkwardly at the base of the porch steps, holding a board game under one arm and a container of homemade cookies in the other. His curly hair was frizzy from the walk, and his dark-rimmed glasses slid down his nose every few seconds. But his smile was steady. "Are you sure he's okay with this?" Jordan asked quietly. Mia nodded. "He doesn't know yet, but his mom wants him to have more people around. Just be yourself." Inside, Keanu greeted them warmly. Jordan gave a nervous wave, which Keanu returned with a small smile and a handshake. "Thanks for coming, Jordan. Luciana's been looking forward to seeing you." In the sunroom, Luciana beamed at the sight of Mia and Jordan. Her face lit up despite her exhaustion. "So, this is the famous Jordan I've heard about," she said, her voice breathy but bright. "Come in, both of you." Jordan approached and knelt beside her, offering the cookies. "It's an honor, Ms. Alvarez. My grandma helped me bake these." Luciana laughed softly. "Then I know they'll be good." But Luca didn't come down. Mia went to the attic room and knocked gently. "Hey, I brought someone today." There was silence behind the door. Then Luca's voice, wary. "Who?" "My best friend Jordan. He's cool, I promise. You don't have to do anything. Just come say hi." A long pause followed. Then slowly the door creaked open. Luca stood there, hands clenched by his sides, his gaze darting behind Mia to where Jordan waited on the stairs. He looked at the board game in Jordan's hands, then back at Mia. "I don't play games." "That's okay," Mia said softly. "We brought it just in case. You can just watch." Luca hesitated. His eyes were guarded, but then he stepped into the hallway. Downstairs, Jordan set up the game in the living room while Mia grabbed drinks. Luciana watched from her chair, resting, but alert. Luca entered the room slowly, every muscle tense, but his mother's soft gaze gave him courage. Jordan looked up and smiled. "Hey, I'm Jordan." "You're Luca, right?" Luca gave a slight nod and sat stiffly on the edge of the armchair across from him. They began playing with Mia, guiding the turns, and Jordan making quiet jokes about how bad he was at strategy. At first, Luca didn't engage, but gradually curiosity pulled him in. He leaned forward, corrected one of Jordan's moves, then made a suggestion. Within 30 minutes, he was sitting beside Jordan, explaining the mathematics behind probability in dice rolls. "You know, Jordan said impressed you'd crush everyone in my math club." Luca's ears turned red. He didn't answer, but for the first time he didn't pull away when Jordan nudged his arm lightly after a win. And when Luciana saw that her son relaxed, talking, even laughing, once she closed her eyes and let herself rest her heart full. That night, as the sky turned to velvet and stars began to pepper the dark, Mia led the two boys outside. The backyard behind the house stretched out into a quiet patch of earth where the city lights faded and the stars shone clear and bright. Luciana, bundled in a thick shawl, watched from the porch in a reclining chair with Keanu at her side, his hand resting gently over hers. Mia had brought a small telescope from her house. Jordan helped her set it up on the patch of grass, while Luca looked on from a distance, his arms crossed uncertain again. But when Mia invited him closer to calibrate it, he stepped forward, fingers instinctively adjusting the focus knobs with precision. "You know constellations?" Mia asked him gently. Luca gave the faintest smile. "Most of them." "Then teach us." He hesitated, but then pointed up. "That's Lyra. You see Vega, that bright one there? It's one of the most luminous stars in the night sky. And over there's Cygnus the Swan." Jordan lay back on the grass, his arms tucked under his head. "Man, I've never heard someone talk about stars like they're people." "They are," Luca said quietly. "They live, they die. Some go supernova and scatter their insides across the universe. And some just fade away." Mia looked at him carefully. She didn't say anything, but she heard the pain beneath those words. So did Luciana, who closed her eyes on the porch, her face tilted toward the sky. Later, they lay on a blanket in the grass, passing a flashlight between them like a campfire. Jordan talked about building a Mars rover out of Legos when he was 8. Mia shared how she once tried to build a jetpack using 2 soda bottles and baking soda. Luca genuinely laughed when she described how it sprayed her dad's garage with foam. They played a game Mia called Star Wishes. Each person had to pick one star and make a wish they'd never said out loud. Jordan wished to build something NASA would actually use. Mia wished her parents would stop fighting. When it was Luca's turn, he hesitated for a long time. Finally, he said, "I wish my mom didn't have to go." No one spoke for a moment. The crickets filled the silence. Jordan reached out and tapped Luca's shoulder. "You know, even if she does, you'll still have us." Luca didn't reply, but he didn't pull away either. As the night deepened, Keanu helped Luciana back inside. Before disappearing through the door, Luciana turned and looked one last time at the 3 kids under the stars. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but there was a small, contented smile on her face. She had made her wish too, and for the first time in years, she believed it might come true. The peace didn't shatter all at once. It started with a click. Mia heard it first while passing by the side of the house. A sharp metallic sound, almost like a camera shutter, coming from behind the row of trimmed hedges near the property line. At first she thought it might have been a bird or a twig snapping underfoot. But then she saw the glint, a long lens poking through the brush aimed straight at Luca's bedroom window. Before she could shout, the lens jerked back. Footsteps scrambled across the gravel. A tall man in a blue windbreaker, someone Mia recognized as Mr. Carson from 2 houses down, vanished into his yard like a thief. Her stomach dropped. She rushed toward the back porch where Keanu and Luciana were having tea. Voices low. They took a picture. Mia gasped, breathless. "Through Luca's window. I saw it. Mr. Carson." Keanu's eyes tightened. He stood immediately. The next morning, everything changed. By sunrise, there were already 3 cars parked at odd angles near the mailbox. By noon, there were 8, all with dark-tinted windows, antennas, and logos half-taped over. Mia watched from her bedroom with her heart in her throat. Microphones, flashbulbs, fold-out chairs. One woman in bright red heels nearly tripped as she leaned over the fence, shouting, "Keanu." "Is the boy your son?" another man called out. "Is he the next Einstein? Why are you hiding him?" Her mother pulled down the blinds. "This is disgusting," she muttered. Mia turned to her father. "We have to help. We have to say something." He looked torn. "Say what?" "That they should leave the boy alone. You think they'll listen to us? I don't care. We have to try." She stormed out of the house, and her father followed, tension mounting. By the time they reached the gate at the edge of Keanu's property, the shouting had grown louder. Mia stood on tiptoe and raised her voice. "Leave him alone!" she shouted, hands cupped around her mouth. "He's just a kid." Several heads turned. One reporter from Austin Weekly moved toward her with a microphone. "Miss, do you know the boy? Are you his friend?" Mia's father stepped between them. No comment. "Back off!" Inside the house, Luca's panic was building. His fingers dug into the edge of his desk, eyes wide as flashbulbs flickered through the blinds. The satellite model sat beside him, untouched for hours. His breath came fast, uneven, like he couldn't find enough air. Luciana tried to calm him with her hands on his shoulders, but her voice was shaky. "I can't breathe," Luca whispered. Keanu entered the room. The moment he saw Luca's trembling hands and pale face, he knew they had run out of time. He crouched beside the boy. "Look at me, Luca. Just look at me. Inhale slowly." Like we practiced, remember, Luca tried. His lips parted, but the breath wouldn't come. Keanu reached for the soft cloth bag Luciana kept near the bookshelf. From it, he pulled out a weighted lap pad, something Luca used on days when his anxiety crept in like a storm. Gently, Keanu draped it across the boy's thighs. "You're safe," he said softly. "No one's coming in here. They're just noise. Let's count to 10 together." Luciana knelt beside him, her strength failing, but her voice steady. 1, 2, 3. Luca clenched his fists, jaw trembling. By 6, the breaths were slower. By 10, his shoulders loosened. "I want them to go away," he whispered. Keanu nodded. "I know, buddy. I know." Downstairs, the doorbell rang 3 times in quick succession. Keanu rose, his expression unreadable. Luciana gave him a faint nod, and he stepped out of the room. In the hallway, he paused, hands gripping the railing. Mia's voice carried faintly from the porch. "She's sick," Mia was saying. "Luca isn't some mystery. He's brilliant, and he's scared. Please stop." When Keanu opened the front door, he didn't raise his voice. He simply stepped out onto the porch, his presence enough to silence the chaos. Respectfully, he said, his voice low, but commanding, "I'm asking you to leave. There is a child inside who doesn't deserve this." "Mr. Reeves," a woman interrupted, "is the boy yours? Is he some kind of government secret? Is he building something for DARPA?" The absurdity of it hung in the air. Keanu didn't blink. "He's a child," Keanu repeated, "and you're frightening him. If you don't leave, I'll take legal action. Every one of your faces is being recorded. This is not Hollywood. This is someone's life." There was a pause, then a camera snapped anyway. Mia's father stepped forward. "Enough. Let the man speak." A few of the reporters lowered their cameras. Others backed away reluctantly. One van pulled out onto the gravel road and drove off, but 2 more arrived to take its place. Keanu turned to Mia and her father. "Thank you," he said, "but this won't stop. Not now." Luciana stood at the top of the staircase, one hand gripping the railing. Her face was pale, her frame thinner than it had been just a week before. She looked at Keanu, then Mia, then toward the windows, trembling under the flashbulbs. "It's happening again," she said faintly. Keanu understood. He'd promised her they wouldn't have to run anymore, that they'd found a place far from the noise. But he'd underestimated the world's hunger to tear open quiet. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the pine trees and the media circus momentarily quieted, Keanu sat on the back porch, staring at the horizon. He hated the idea of running again, but Luca's safety came first. That night, the house remained dark except for the flickering light of the television, muted and ignored. Keanu stood in the living room, arms crossed, gazing at the door, as if expecting it to burst open again. Mia sat beside Luca on the couch, gently brushing his hair back, her presence anchoring him. Luciana lay in her bedroom exhausted. The strain had worn her thin. She hadn't said much after the confrontation, just a whisper I was hoping he'd get a little more time. Keanu replayed those words in his mind. Time. That was the one thing they never had enough of. He walked quietly into the kitchen, where Mia's father was cleaning up dishes that had barely been touched. The older man looked up, eyes tired. "Will you leave?" he asked. Keanu hesitated. "I don't want to, but you might have to." Keanu nodded slowly. "It's not just about me anymore. Luca, he trusted us. This house gave him something he's never had before: safety. But safety can't be a prison, the man said gently. Not for Luciana, not for Luca. Keanu looked out the back window toward the trees, where the shadows of journalists' flashlights still flickered like ghosts in the dark. I was wrong, Keanu said. I thought I could protect him by hiding him, but maybe that just made the world more curious. Mia entered the kitchen, overhearing the last part. So what now? We run again. Keanu turned to her. Not without Luciana, and not until Luca is ready. Mia stepped closer. He won't ever be ready if we don't show him how to face it. Keanu's jaw tightened. The words struck deep. Just then, a soft knock came from the living room doorway. It was Luca. His voice was barely audible. Can we go outside? Keanu blinked. Now Luca nodded. To the woods. Just a little. The stars help. Mia smiled, already pulling on her sweater. Keanu grabbed the flashlight from the wall. They walked through the back, out the sliding door, stepping into the cool night. The media had shifted to the front, unaware of their escape into the trees. They reached the clearing where they used to stargaze. Luca looked up. I don't like them, he said. The people with the cameras, they make me feel like I'm something weird. You're not weird, Keanu said. You're brilliant and kind and brave for coming out here. Luca looked at him, eyes steady. If we go, can we go somewhere with no cameras? Keanu kneeled in front of him. If we go, it'll be because you choose. Not because you're scared, but until then we'll stay. And I'll stand in front of every camera if I have to. Luca didn't smile, but he stepped closer and leaned into Keanu's chest. For the first time, Keanu didn't feel like a protector. He felt like a father. The sun hadn't yet risen when Keanu quietly entered the garage. The cool morning air bit against his skin, but his focus was elsewhere. In front of him sat an old SUV, one that hadn't been touched in months. It was dusty, unassuming, perfect for disappearing. He checked the tires, the oil, the gas level. Everything had to be ready. There would be no second chances. Luciana was deteriorating faster than they expected. She'd barely spoken the day before, her energy flickering in and out like a candle in the wind. The doctor said she had weeks. Keanu suspected it might be days, and Luca, brilliant as he was, couldn't hold the weight of the media storm that had slammed into their quiet sanctuary. The house was no longer safe. They had to go. Keanu packed supplies into the back of the SUV: medical gear, clothes, dried food, Luca's favorite sketchbooks. No one else could know where they were going. A private cabin hours away, built years ago on a friend's property in Northern California. Remote, quiet, off the grid. It was the only place left untouched by cameras or microphones. Back inside the house, Mia stood near the window, watching the morning light stretch across the grass. She'd come over early, her face pale and quiet, knowing what today meant. Luca sat beside her on the floor, legs crossed, soldering something with a tiny flashlight clipped to his collar. His fingers moved with calm precision, connecting wires and circuits. Keanu watched them from the hallway for a long moment before stepping in. We leave at noon, he said softly. Luca looked up. Will Mia be there when we go? Keanu hesitated, then nodded. She's here to say goodbye. Luca didn't say anything for a while. Then he picked up the small device he'd been working on and held it out to Mia. It was round silver with a soft glowing button in the center and a braided leather strap. His thumb pressed it gently and the device lit up with a soft chime. I made this for you, he said. It doesn't do much, just glows. But when you press the button, I'll know. Not here, he added quickly, tapping his head, but here. He pressed his chest. So if you ever think of me, you don't have to say anything. Just press it. Mia took it carefully, tears welling up. It's beautiful, Luca. It's not perfect, he mumbled, but I didn't want you to forget me. Mia knelt down and hugged him tight. I couldn't forget you if I tried. Luciana, who had been asleep in the adjacent room, stirred. Keanu helped her sit up slowly, propping pillows behind her. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, but her eyes still held that quiet fire. Mia, she whispered, come here, sweetheart. Mia moved beside the bed, taking Luciana's hand. It felt fragile like paper. Luciana smiled weakly. "I won't get many words out," she said. "But there's something I need to ask." Mia leaned closer, blinking back tears. "Will you write to him?" Luciana asked. "Tell him stories, about anything. He needs someone who sees the world in color, not just numbers." Mia held Luciana's hand tighter. The request hit her harder than she expected. Writing to Luca wasn't just about updates or letters. It was about keeping him anchored, keeping a piece of this house alive after it went dark. She nodded through the tears. "I promise," she whispered. "I'll write. Every week. Even if you're off the grid. Even if I don't know where you are. I'll write." Luciana smiled. It was faint, but it reached her eyes. Her fingers curled slightly, then relaxed. Keanu stood nearby, watching quietly, the weight of what was coming settling on his chest like a stone. Outside, the reporters were already gathering again. Keanu had counted 3 vans by sunrise. They wouldn't risk a door knock yet, not without cause, but he knew it was only a matter of time. One headline had labeled him a kidnapper, another a manipulator hiding a dying woman, and a mysterious genius child. They were painting stories, twisting facts, speculating without mercy. Inside, it was still. Almost too still. Luciana leaned her head back and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them again, softer now. "Mia," she said quietly, "you're his only real friend." "I know," Mia said. "I won't leave him behind." Luciana turned her eyes toward Keanu. "Take care of him. Of both of them." "I will," Keanu said, "with everything I've got." Luciana reached over and squeezed Mia's hand one last time. "He's going to build something beautiful one day. Not just machines. He's going to rebuild hearts." Mia nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Downstairs, Luca had packed his things in a small canvas bag. He held it like it was his shield, quiet, controlled, but the tremble in his hand betrayed the storm inside. He turned one last time to the corner of the living room where the telescope sat by the window. The lens was cracked. He hadn't had time to fix it. He hesitated, then ran over and carefully removed the cracked lens, tucking it into his pocket. Keanu found him there and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Time to go, Luca." Luca nodded. His voice was barely a whisper. "Can I say goodbye to the stars?" Keanu followed his gaze. "You'll see them again, from somewhere quieter." Mia came down the stairs and stood beside him. She didn't say a word, just opened her arms, and Luca leaned in. He held on tightly, then even tighter. His body shook with the weight of it all. "I don't want to go," he said. "I know," Mia whispered. "But you have to." He pulled back, wiped his eyes with his sleeve, then pressed the small communicator in her hand again. "Promise you'll use it." "I already did," she said. "Just now." Keanu opened the back door slowly, checking the alley. No one yet, but it wouldn't stay that way long. They had minutes. "Mia," he said softly, "it's time." She nodded and stepped aside. The neighborhood was never the same after they left. At first there were rumors, then silence. The black SUV that once idled quietly in Keanu's driveway was gone. The mailbox, once overflowing with mysterious envelopes, was empty. And the house, the one that had stirred so much curiosity, was now listed as vacant. The for sale sign came up 2 days after the last van pulled away. No official statement, no press release, just silence. Mia stood across the street, watching the wind rustle the edges of the tall grass that had already started creeping up around the porch. It looked abandoned, like a place frozen in time. As if nothing had ever happened, as if no boy named Luca had ever lived there. She clutched the communicator he'd given her, the small hand-built device, now slightly worn from daily use. Each morning before school and each night before bed, she pressed the small button. It didn't make a sound. There was no blinking light, no confirmation. But she pressed it anyway. Sometimes she whispered something into the air. Sometimes she said nothing at all. Her parents noticed the change in her. She had become quieter, not withdrawn, just more inward. She still smiled when Jordan cracked jokes, still helped her mom cook dinner, still made it to school on time. But behind her eyes, something lingered, a question unanswered. Did Luca remember her? Was he okay? The silence was the hardest part. Not the loss, not even the uncertainty, but the stillness that followed. One afternoon, Mia walked home from school the long way, just to pass by the old house again. The curtains were still drawn. A few leaves gathered near the front door. For a moment she imagined Luca still there, hidden inside, watching her from behind the blinds. But she knew better. They were gone. Every day she looked at the communicator and wondered what he saw on his side. Was there a signal? Did he hear her voice? Did he smile when she pressed it like he promised he would? The days turned to weeks. Her routine stayed the same. Press the button. Wait. Nothing. But still she pressed it, because it meant something. It meant she hadn't let go. Jordan tried to cheer her up. They played card games and even built a small telescope together. It wasn't as good as Luca's, but it worked well enough to see the craters on the moon. One night, Mia brought it outside and stared up at the stars for over an hour. She didn't say it out loud, but she was hoping maybe Luca was looking up at the same stars. Maybe they were still connected somehow. The communicator sat next to her on the lawn chair. She pressed it once gently, then again. Still no response. But then came a Thursday. It had rained all morning. Mia came home soaked, threw her backpack onto the floor, and collapsed on the couch. That's when the house phone rang. She stared at it. No one ever called that line. She answered slowly. A familiar voice said, "Hi, Mia. It's Keanu." Mia sat up straight, her heart thudding against her ribs. "Keanu," she said barely above a whisper. "Yeah," he replied gently. "It's me. I know it's been a while. I promised Luca I'd call you when things settled." Her breath caught. For weeks she had imagined this moment. Wondered if he'd forgotten. Wondered if Luca had forgotten. But now the voice was real, steady, and kind. "Is he okay?" There was a pause. She could hear the hum of wind on the other end of the line. Then Keanu said, "He misses you. Every day. He kept your drawing, by the way. The one you gave him the night we left. It's taped to the inside of his journal." Mia blinked fast, swallowing the emotion building in her chest. He still thinks of me all the time," Keanu said. "We've had to stay off the grid. Some people were getting too close, asking too many questions. But I wanted you to know he's safe. He's been asking if I've heard from you if you ever pressed the communicator." "I pressed it," Mia said quickly. "Every day, twice a day, sometimes more." Keanu chuckled softly. Then he got the signal. He just couldn't respond, but he smiled every time. I'd see it in his face, like the world got a little lighter. A wave of relief and warmth flooded her. After so much silence, hearing those words was like opening a window after a storm. "Can I talk to him?" Keanu hesitated. "Not yet. Where we are now, it's risky to put him on directly, but he wanted me to tell you something." Mia leaned closer to the phone, her grip tight. He said, "Tell Mia the stars are still there. I'm looking at them too." Her eyes filled. Also, Keanu added, "He's been building something. I'm not allowed to tell you what. He says it's a surprise." Mia laughed through her tears. That sounded like Luca. Always tinkering, always imagining something new. "Will I ever see him again?" she asked, voice trembling. Keanu was quiet for a moment, then spoke with care. "I don't know when, but yes, that's the plan, when the time is right." She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. "And Luciana." "She's holding on," he said softly. "She talks about you. She rereads your notes." They gave her strength during the hard nights. Mia closed her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Keanu said. "Thank you for being his friend, for not forgetting him. You made him feel like a kid again, like the world wasn't just fear and hiding." Mia wiped her eyes and whispered, "Tell him I never stopped believing." "I will," Keanu said. "And Mia, stay close to the stars. That's where he's sending the next message." The line clicked, and for the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like waiting for something worth believing in. 3 weeks later, Mia received another message from Keanu. This time, it was an invitation. The note was short, typed on a simple card inside a plain envelope. It read, Mia Luciana would like to see you. If you're willing, we're in Taos. It's time. Keanu. No other details, no address, but within the hour her phone buzzed with a single set of GPS coordinates and a time. Mia packed that night. She didn't tell anyone. The next morning she boarded a bus headed for northern New Mexico, her heart pounding the whole ride. The mountains grew taller the deeper they went. The air got thinner, colder, crisper. When she finally stepped off at the last stop near the village of Arroyo Seco, a black pickup truck was waiting. She recognized it before she saw the driver. Keanu leaned against the door, arms folded, a quiet look in his eyes. You came, he said softly. Mia nodded. I would have come sooner if I'd known. He gave a small smile and opened the door for her. She asked for you, every day. They drove in silence, through winding mountain roads, the sunlight flickering through tall pines and cottonwoods. Snow capped the ridges in the distance. The facility appeared out of nowhere, built into the side of the mountain like it had always belonged there. Clean adobe walls, wide windows, and the quiet hum of wind and birds. This is it, Keanu said. No visitors, no media. Just people who want peace. Inside, the walls were painted with warm earth tones. Everything smelled like cedar and fresh linens. Nurses walked with soft voices. No one rushed. No one raised their voice. Time moved slowly here. He led Mia through a long hallway until they reached a room with a hand-painted nameplate on the door. Luciana Reyes. He paused before knocking. She's resting now, Keanu said. But Luca's inside. He hasn't left her side. Mia nodded, suddenly unsure of her legs. He opened the door quietly. The room was filled with late morning light. There were wildflowers in a vase on the windowsill. Luciana lay in bed, eyes closed, a shawl over her shoulders. Her breathing was light, shallow. Her face, though pale, still carried grace. Luca sat beside her, his small hand wrapped around hers. When he looked up and saw Mia, his eyes widened. Then he smiled. Not the smile of surprise or politeness, but the kind that blooms from a place that has been waiting. You came, he whispered. Mia crossed the room and knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. Luca clung to her fiercely, like he'd been holding something in for too long. I missed you, he said into her sleeve. I missed you more, she whispered. They stayed like that for a long moment until Luciana stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, slow but clear. She turned toward the sound of their voices and smiled faintly. Mia stood, holding Luciana's gaze. I'm here, Mia said gently, just like you asked. Luciana's lips moved slowly. Her voice was thin. Thank you for not forgetting him. Luciana's eyes, though tired, held a deep calm as she looked at Mia and Luca side by side. She reached her hand toward Mia, trembling but deliberate. Mia took it with both of hers, gently cradling the woman's fingers. Her skin was paper thin, her touch light, like a breeze about to disappear. I used to wonder, Luciana said slowly, her voice barely above a breath, if the world would be kind to him. If anyone would really see him. Mia blinked back, the tears gathering in her eyes. I saw him, she whispered. From the very first moment. Luciana gave the faintest nod. Then I can rest now. Keanu moved closer, standing at the other side of the bed. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. Luciana turned her head slightly, her eyes finding him. You kept your promise, she whispered. I did, Keanu replied softly. And you brought her here. She brought herself. Luciana's breath hitched, but her smile deepened. Her hand tightened for a second around Mia's. I always told Luca, love doesn't need permission, it just finds you. Mia felt the weight of that sentence settle deep inside her chest. She looked over at Luca, who was now sitting beside her again, his hand in hers. He had leaned his head against her shoulder. His eyes were full of something too big for words, relief, sadness, hope, all tangled into one. Luciana turned her gaze to her son, her features softened. My treasure, she whispered. Luca stood and leaned forward. I'm here, Mama. Luciana reached up slowly, placing her hand on his cheek. Don't be afraid when I go. You're not alone. You're not going anywhere, Luca said quickly, his voice shaking. Luciana smiled at him. I'll always be here in your songs, in your dreams. Then she turned her gaze back to Mia. And now, you have someone who sees you. Mia nodded through her tears. I'll take care of him. Luciana's fingers slipped from Mia's hands and returned to rest beside her on the blanket. She looked toward the window where the light poured in golden and still. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Luciana took a breath deeper than before and slowly let it out. Another, and another. Then, silence. Keanu reached over and gently closed her eyes. The machine stayed quiet. There was no alarm, no beeping, just a stillness that wrapped the room like a warm veil. Mia's tears spilled freely now. She held Luca close as he clung to her, his sobs quiet, trembling through his frame. Keanu placed a hand on Luciana's shoulder, then one on Luca's back. She waited for this, he said gently, for peace. Outside the window, the wind shifted. A few petals from the vase fluttered and landed on the blanket near Luciana's chest. She looked peaceful, like someone who had finally let go after making sure everything was in place. The air was cool and still on the mountain slope. The small gathering stood in a half circle around a simple pine coffin, resting beneath a grove of aspens that rustled gently in the wind. The mountain hospital had allowed Luciana's funeral to be held on their grounds in a peaceful clearing not far from the hospice building. It felt sacred, untouched, and right. Luca stood at the head of the grave, his hands shaking as he clutched something small and round in his fist. Mia stood beside him. She didn't speak, but her presence was solid warm. Keanu stood just behind them, giving them space, but not distance. He was close enough to catch them if they fell. Luca looked down at the casket. I built it when I was 8, he said, softly holding the object up. It's not a real satellite, just wires and cardboard and old calculator parts. But I told Mama it would orbit the stars and send back songs. His voice cracked, but he kept going. She never laughed at me, never once said it was silly. She put it on the dresser and called it her skybox, said it kept her company when I was away at school. He knelt down and gently placed the little model on top of the casket, just above where her hands rested beneath the wood. I wanted to be an engineer. I still do. But I lost my way. He closed his eyes, breathing through the weight in his chest. I promise you, Mama, I'll live, I'll build, I'll try. His fingers lingered on the casket, and for a moment, everything was still. Then Mia stepped forward and placed a single sunflower next to the satellite. She loved those, she said, her voice steady but low. She told me once they reminded her of you, always turning toward the light. Luca looked at her, and something in his eyes shifted. It was the beginning of healing. A slow, fragile beginning, but real. The ceremony ended with silence instead of prayer. Keanu nodded to the groundskeeper, who began to lower the casket gently. The group dispersed slowly, one by one, until only the 3 of them remained. Luca didn't move for a long time. He just watched the wind dance through the tall grass around the clearing. Finally, Keanu broke the silence. We're heading north. Luca turned. To California, Keanu nodded. There's a place in Mendocino. Quiet. Trees. She would have liked it. Mia looked between them, sensing something final in the tone. You're leaving soon. Keanu nodded again. End of the week. Luca stepped closer to Mia. I don't want this to be goodbye. It doesn't have to be, she said gently. You changed everything he said. So did you. They smiled. The ache was still there, but it didn't feel so heavy now. Not when it was shared. The afternoon sun dipped behind the pines as they walked down the winding trail back toward the hospice. The dirt path crunched under their feet, the scent of sagebrush and fresh pine rising in the warm air. For a long while, no one said anything. It wasn't the silence of grief anymore. It was something gentler. The quiet of a chapter closing. As they neared the edge of the parking lot, Mia turned to Keanu. Do you really think California will help him? Keanu took a slow breath before answering. He's got memories tied to every block in Albuquerque. the street where they lost the house, the diner where he used to wait for Luciana's shift to end, the corner where he used to sleep in his truck. I think he needs a new sky to look up at, something that doesn't carry so much pain. Mia nodded, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I get it. Change the sky. Change the story. Keanu looked at her, studying her face. You know Luciana never stopped believing in him, even at the end. Mia's throat tightened. She believed in me too, even when I didn't. They reached the car. Keanu unlocked it, but no one got in yet. Instead, they stood there in the quiet. You'll write? Luca asked, suddenly breaking the stillness. Mia smiled. Of course. I want to hear about Mendocino, and satellites, and your new sky. He smiled softly. You'll always be part of this story, even if the setting changes. Keanu looked at both of them and gave a small nod of approval. She helped you both, he said, in different ways, but deeply. Mia turned to Luca. What are you going to do with her notebooks? He reached into his backpack and pulled out a weathered leather journal. She had this one with her until the end, wrote in it even when she was too weak to eat. I haven't read it yet. Mia reached out and touched the cover gently. Maybe when you're ready, you could share some of it. Luca looked down at the journal, his expression unreadable. She wrote about the stars a lot. And you. And dreams. I'll read it. Someday. I think I have to. Mia took a deep breath. When I met her, I was lost. Working a job I hated, living in a place I didn't feel at home in. She didn't just give me a place to stay. She gave me something to believe in again. Luca nodded slowly. That sounds like her. The wind picked up a little, sending pine needles drifting across the asphalt. The hospital stood in the distance, fading slowly into the landscape, as if it had always belonged to the mountain. Keanu finally opened the car door and looked at Luca. We'll pack tomorrow morning. Start fresh. Luca hesitated, then said softly, Will you keep the picture? Keanu blinked. Which one? The one of her and me. When I was 7. The one on the fridge. Keanu smiled gently. I already packed it. Mia walked up to Luca and opened her arms. He stepped into the hug, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Thank you for finding me, he whispered. Thank you for letting me stay, she replied. They stepped back, eyes glassy but clear. As Keanu started the engine, Mia stepped back from the car. She raised her hand in a wave as the tires crunched over the gravel. Luca leaned out the window. Promise me something. Anything. Mia said, Don't stop turning toward the light. She smiled, blinking away tears. I won't. You either. The car disappeared around the bend, swallowed by trees. Mia stood alone for a moment, watching the road. Then she turned and walked back up the path, one hand brushing over the tall wildflowers that lined the edge. Her story wasn't over. Neither was his. Not anymore. 2 months had passed since Luciana's funeral, and the ache in Luca's chest had become something quieter. Not gone, but softer, like a song that had faded but left behind its echo. The world outside had changed too. Keanu had kept his promise. They'd moved north to Mendocino, where the cliffs met the ocean, and the trees stood tall like guardians of peace. And there, nestled between a grove of redwoods and a quiet road, stood the dream they had built from pain, Aura's workshop. The name came from Luciana's favorite word, aura. Now. She used to say it when she was sick and the world seemed to pause. Now is what we have. Not yesterday, not someday. Luca had chosen it for her. Keanu funded the land and the permits, even the remodeled barn they converted into a learning center. But the soul of it was Luca's. The place wasn't flashy. The walls were plain pine, varnished and warm. The windows were big, letting sunlight pour over tables, lined with motherboards, tools, coils of wire, half-built drones and rolls of blueprint paper. A chalkboard stretched across one wall, covered in formulas that only a few kids in the county would understand. But this place wasn't just for understanding. It was for breathing. There were 10 kids enrolled so far, all of them smart, some painfully so. A few barely spoke above a whisper. Others spoke in rapid bursts of code and concepts and theories. Many didn't fit in at regular schools. Here, though, no one flinched if you stared too long at a resistor. No one laughed if you talked to yourself while building a robot. The rules were simple. Be kind, be curious, and be honest. Keanu stood at the front window, arms folded, watching Luca kneel beside a girl with copper braids who was building her first gyroscope. "He's different," Keanu said softly as Mia stepped up beside him. Mia smiled. "He's becoming someone she would have been proud of." "He already was," Keanu replied. "Now he's just showing the world." Mia looked around. There were shelves labeled by project type, satellite prototypes, environmental sensors, oceanic drones. A section was even marked failed ideas, and it was the most colorful part of the room. Covered in glittered casings, cracked solder points, and handwritten notes like, "This didn't work, but it was fun." Keanu turned to Mia. "I want you to be a part of this." Mia blinked. "Me? You helped him grow. You helped me believe we could build something like this. These kids need more than blueprints. They need heart. You've got that." From across the room, Luca waved, motioning for Mia to join him. He was standing beside a work table with 2 chairs, a spread of materials laid out carefully between them, wires, circuits, tiny satellite components. She walked over slowly. The moment felt familiar, like stepping back into the basement that had once been their sanctuary. But now it was bigger, brighter, open to others. Luca tapped the table. Ready to build something new, he asked, eyes shining. Mia sat down. "What are we making?" He lifted a sleek silver casing and set it in front of her. Luca sat too. He said, voice steady. "But this time, I'm not doing it alone." Mia ran her fingers along the edge of the satellite shell. It was cold smooth and gleamed under the soft overhead lights. Her eyes flicked up to Luca, whose face was calm, but focused like the world around him had narrowed to this moment. "You designed this?" she asked. "With help," he said. "I sent the base specs to a friend at a university. He said it looked like something NASA might be proud of. But this one's better than the first." "Why?" she asked. "Because this one's going to carry." "Voices," Luca replied. "Not just mine." He reached into a small box beside the table and pulled out a round, coin-sized chip, its surface etched with delicate looping patterns. "It's an audio memory core. I've recorded messages from the kids here from you, even from Mom when she could still talk. It'll orbit for 20 years. If anyone ever hears it, they'll know we existed, that we cared, that we tried." Mia stared at it, her throat tightening. "You're sending her voice into space," she whispered. Luca nodded. "She used to say her love wasn't meant to stay trapped in rooms. She said love should orbit like light. I wanted to honor that." Keanu approached with 2 mugs of tea, setting them down gently. "It's amazing what grief can build," he said quietly. Mia smiled through glassy eyes. "And what love can launch." The afternoon passed like time didn't matter. Mia helped solder fine wiring while Luca guided her hands with patience that surprised even him. Across the room, a boy was programming a robot arm, and a girl with a scar above her eyebrow was testing a homemade telescope. The room was alive with small, beautiful energy. Keanu walked out to the porch, gazing across the field beyond. The trees swayed in the breeze, and the sky overhead turned from pale blue to the soft gold of evening. When he looked back through the window, he saw something he hadn't dared hope for months ago. Luca smiling, genuinely smiling. Later that night, after the last kid had been picked up and the lights had dimmed to soft amber, Luca and Mia remained at the work table. The satellite casing was nearly complete. Mia held the communicator Luca had given her weeks ago, the small device she used to press against her palm when she missed him. Now it rested beside the new satellite as if passing the torch. "Still press it?" he asked. "Every day," she said. Luca hesitated, then reached over and picked it up. "I think maybe we can embed it, make it part of LucaSat 2. That way it'll always be on." Mia nodded, voice cracking. "Then it'll never be just silence." They sealed the shell together. One last click, one last turn of the tiny latch, and it was closed. Luca leaned back and let out a breath that seemed to carry all the weight he'd held for months. Tomorrow, he said, we start programming the launch sequence. And the day after that, she asked. He looked at her eyes steady. We keep going. The ribbon fluttered in the breeze, held at both ends by two children who could barely stop fidgeting with excitement. A small crowd had gathered on the wide lawn outside the new facility. Parents, neighbors, teachers, a few local reporters. The sign above the building was simple, but it caught the light just right. Luciana's Light, a workshop for brilliant, anxious kids. Keanu stood beside the sign, one hand resting gently on Luca's shoulder. His other hand held a pair of scissors. He looked out at the people in front of him and offered a soft smile. I want to tell you something, he said. This place isn't just about science. It's not just about robotics or satellites or math. It's about a promise. He looked down at Luca, then at Mia, who stood proudly beside the other children from the first basement workshop. Her eyes glistened already. Years ago, a woman I loved bought a house for $1, Keanu continued. She bought it not because it was beautiful, but because it gave her son a place to be safe, a place to grow, to feel. That house was never about walls. It was about possibility. He paused. The crowd listened, breath held. This workshop is built in her name. And every Luciana's Light we open, whether it's here in California or one day in Texas or New York or even overseas, will have a symbol in it. A $1 item, not fancy, not expensive, just meaningful. To remind every kid who walks through those doors that value isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in dignity, in kindness, in love. He cut the ribbon. Applause burst forward like sunlight breaking through clouds. Inside, the space was alive. The design echoed the original basement rounded tables, corkboards filled with sketches, digital whiteboards buzzing with color. But everything was upgraded, larger, brighter, more tools, more materials. What had once been a quiet experiment in one house now had room for dozens of minds. At the entrance, beneath a glass box, sat the very first dollar bill Luciana had ever touched in that transaction. Framed below it was a photo of her sitting on the porch with Luca in her lap, Mia to the side, and Keanu standing behind them all. That image became the soul of the place. Parents walked slowly through the hallways, some holding hands with their children, others trailing behind as their kids darted from table to table, eyes wide at the 3D printer's drone kits and telescope mounts. One mother covered her mouth when her son, a boy who hadn't spoken outside their home, in 3 years pointed to a robotic hand and said, "Can I try that?" Another father broke down entirely when his daughter was asked to join a small team designing a balloon satellite launch. She had been called weird at school. Today, she was called captain of the launch team. In the corner, Luca watched quietly, his hands in his pockets. Keanu joined him. "You okay?" he asked. Luca nodded. "It's good. It's better than I thought." Keanu followed his gaze to a shelf on the far wall. Among all the polished tools and advanced equipment sat a single battered lamp, the same one from the old house. It still had the small chip in the base and the same warm yellow glow, their $1 item. Mia stood in the center of the workshop, watching children as they clustered around different projects. Her eyes caught on one girl, maybe 10 years old, who sat nervously at a table with a pile of wires. She reminded Mia of herself, cautious, unsure if she belonged. Mia crouched beside her. "Hey," she said gently. "Want some help?" The girl looked up wide-eyed. "I don't know where to start." Mia smiled. "That's okay. Neither did I." "You know what helped me? Having someone who believed in me before I even believed in myself." The girl's gaze shifted slightly and her hands loosened. Mia reached over and helped her connect the first 2 wires. A light flickered on. "You did that," Mia whispered. A slow smile spread across the girl's face. Across the room, Keanu watched it all. He wasn't just proud. He was grounded by the vision that had finally taken root, an idea Luciana had carried for years. A space where kids like Luca wouldn't have to hide in basements or whisper dreams into walls. A place where they could say them out loud, build them, fly them. Later that afternoon, a quiet ceremony was held in the back room. Just Keanu, Mia, Luca, and a few early members of the project. They stood in front of a mural painted on the wall. It was Luciana's face, soft and kind eyes full of both exhaustion and hope. Beneath the mural sat a shelf. On it were items from the old house, the chipped mug she used to sip tea from while watching Luca solder circuits the frayed blanket they had wrapped around him during winter storms, and the first blueprint of Luca Sat 1 drawn in pencil and stained with tears and coffee. Luca stepped forward and gently placed another object on the shelf. It was the silver keychain Keanu had given him months earlier, engraved with the words, "Courage never dies." "I used to think that hiding was survival," Luca said. "But she taught me that sharing is survival, that helping someone else with their fear helps mine shrink too." He turned to Mia. "Thanks for showing me how not to be afraid to be seen." Mia blinked quickly and gave a quiet nod. One of the parents stepped forward afterward, wiping away tears. "My son used to say he wanted to disappear. He said he felt like his brain was too loud, but now every morning he wakes up asking when we're coming here." Keanu put a hand on the parent's shoulder. "You're not alone. None of us are." That night, as the workshop lights dimmed and the kids filtered out with their families, one final moment remained. Keanu walked to the center of the main room and turned off the last switch, plunging the space into peaceful silence. But one lamp stayed on. The old lamp. The $1 lamp. Its glow lit the wall like a quiet promise, like Luciana whispering, "Keep going." And they would. Forever. 1 year later, the sky over the Nevada desert was a soft canvas of gold and rose as sunrise crept across the horizon. A modest crowd had gathered near a small makeshift launch pad. No big corporations, no slick tech banners, just folding chairs, dusty boots and tears waiting behind sunglasses. The kind of crowd built from second chances and stubborn hope. A large digital countdown ticked silently in the background. It was nearly time. At the center of the gathering, Luca stood in a clean button-down shirt, slightly wrinkled from the wind, holding a small capsule in both hands. Inside it were dozens of handwritten notes, drawings, dreams, and quiet wishes, each one created by the children of Luciana's light workshops across the country. Some were written in crayons, some scribbled in careful cursive, one on a napkin. Every single one would be aboard the satellite they were about to launch. The name, stenciled in blue across the side of the payload module, read, "Luciana Sat." Next to Luca, Mia checked the telemetry with the small ground control team. Her fingers moved with precision, but her eyes kept drifting toward the crowd, toward the mothers clutching their children's hands, toward the fathers who once didn't know how to speak to their sons, toward the kids who had stopped hiding what made them different, and toward Keanu. He stood a few rows back, hands in the pockets of a black windbreaker, his hair swept back from the breeze. He didn't want to be at the front. He never did. But everyone knew this wouldn't have happened without him. A staffer stepped forward and handed him a small mic. Keanu hesitated for a moment, then accepted it, nodding once. He didn't walk to a stage. He just turned to the crowd standing there in the sand and spoke plainly. "Luciana once told me that kindness doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it just knocks on your door with tired eyes and a heart full of fire." He looked over at Mia and Luca. She didn't live to see this day, but she built it anyway. He held up one of the notes, unfolded it gently. "This is from Jaden. He's 9. He wrote, 'I used to think space was far away, but now a piece of me is going.'" The crowd stilled. That's what this launch is. It's not about satellites. It's not about science or headlines. It's about giving kids a place to say, "I'm here," a place to believe they matter even if they whisper it. He paused, his voice steady. "You don't have to be loud to matter. Just kind." The silence afterward was not empty. It was sacred. The technician nearby gave a final cue, T-minus 30 seconds. Luca slipped the capsule into its chamber on the launch module and sealed the lid. Then he walked over to Mia. She had tears in her eyes already. He reached for her hand. Mia held Luca's hand tightly as the final seconds ticked down. Behind them, a wave of emotion swept through the group, children clutching their letters, parents holding their breath. The desert was silent, except for the soft rumble of engines warming. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The launch was gentle at first, a soft burst of sand and flame, then quickly the rocket shot upward into the morning sky. As it rose, everyone tilted their heads, shielding their eyes from the sun, but never looking away. It wasn't just a rocket. It was Luciana's love rising past the clouds. It was all the kids who once sat silent in corners, who now knew their voice could orbit the earth. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound roll through him. This wasn't about him. This was about what Luciana started, what Mia and Luca had carried forward, what all of them had protected in her name. Beside him, a father let out a quiet sob. He had driven 3 states just so his daughter could see this moment. His little girl clutched a photo she had drawn of Luciana's house, the original $1 home where it had all begun. Another child pointed at the sky and whispered, "My letter is up there." A teenager in a wheelchair whispered to his mother, "I wrote about how I used to hide my notebook. Now I want to show it to the world." Mia leaned her head gently against Luca's shoulder. For a long time, they just watched the smoke trail curve across the pale blue sky. Then the crowd began to clap slowly at first, then building. It wasn't the kind of clapping reserved for astronauts or billion-dollar missions. It was the applause of people who had witnessed something real, something that told them even the quietest child deserved to be heard. Later, as the dust settled, families gathered around a new bronze plaque unveiled beside the launch site. It read, "Luciana's Light, where kindness lifts off." Beneath it were the names of every child whose note had gone up with the satellite. In small script at the bottom, one final line, "In honor of the $1 house that taught us what home really means." Keanu helped a boy in a green jacket find his name on the plaque. The boy ran his fingers over the letters, then looked up and whispered, "I didn't think I'd ever be part of something big. You are," Keanu said gently. A breeze passed through, rustling the flags of all the states represented. 47 workshops had contributed, thousands of kids, countless hours, and all of it because one woman with failing lungs had believed love could echo farther than her voice ever would. Luca turned to Mia. She would have loved this. "She's here," Mia whispered. The two of them stood in the middle of a wide-open sky surrounded by hope. No buildings, no walls, just wind and a trail of fire disappearing into the heavens. Luciana's light had found its place in orbit, but more importantly, it had found a place in thousands of hearts, quiet, unwavering, and eternal. A year had passed since the LucianaSat launch, but its ripple was still moving outward like a quiet tide that refused to fade. In cities across the country, Phoenix, Atlanta, Des Moines, and even Anchorage, small workshop banners began to appear on community center walls. Each one bore Luciana's name hand-stitched by local parents or painted by children. And each one welcomed kids who didn't quite fit in anywhere else. In a quiet classroom on the outskirts of Milwaukee, a girl who once stuttered in every sentence now stood at the front of the room explaining a science project. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. Her poster showed constellations and wind velocity she had written to the satellite asking if the stars ever felt alone up there. And now she wanted to build things that would make sure no one ever did. In Los Angeles, a boy who had once been expelled for fighting now sat cross-legged on the floor of a downtown workshop helping a 6-year-old build a paper rocket. When asked why he volunteered, he simply said, "Because I got another chance." Mia watched these moments unfold from afar, and sometimes in person. She had received a full scholarship to a prestigious engineering program that partnered with the National Space Agency. She carried her sketchbook everywhere, its cover-worn pages filled with diagrams, poems, and the original satellite designs she and Luca had worked on. She wasn't the loudest voice in any room, but professors paused when she spoke. Her words carried weight, and her presence held purpose. Between exams, she flew back to visit the workshops. Kids ran to her like she was a rock star holding up their journals, asking her to read just one more sentence. She always did. Every single one. Luca, now finishing his final year of high school, had grown taller, a little broader in the shoulders, but his eyes still held that deep gentleness. He didn't need to be the center of attention, he never had. but the younger kids looked to him like a compass. He didn't just build things, he built trust. At the original workshop in New Mexico, where it all began, Luca stood quietly in the back one Saturday morning while a new group of kids gathered for orientation. A small boy was clinging to his mother, refusing to let go. He wore thick glasses and had a nervous twitch in his hand. Luca knelt beside him and said softly, "It's okay. I was scared too." The boy blinked. Yeah, Luca said, offering his hand. "But this place helped me find out I wasn't broken. I was just quiet. There's a difference." The boy looked up at him, then slowly took his hand. From across the room, Keanu watched the scene unfold with a quiet pride that sat heavy in his chest. He had visited dozens of workshops over the past few months, never announcing his presence, never giving speeches. He just showed up, listened, and helped where he could. Sometimes he swept the floors. Other times he handed out granola bars, but always he paid attention. In Detroit, a mother approached Keanu after one of the workshops ended. Her coat was worn thin, her face tired, but her eyes were clear with something stronger than gratitude. Her son Evan had stopped speaking after his father left. He hadn't said a full sentence in nearly a year. But during his third week at the workshop, he whispered to one of the volunteers, "I like the stars. They don't leave." That whisper became a sentence, then a conversation, then a presentation on the solar system. Evan now spoke more at home. He asked questions, told jokes. One night, he looked his mother in the eyes and said, "I think I want to be like Luca." The mother, holding back tears, reached for Keanu's arm. "This saved my child," she said softly. Keanu nodded. "That's why we built it." He never needed more than that. The program had never been about noise or recognition. It was about connection, one quiet child at a time, one overlooked story at a time. Luciana's dream had become something living, growing in soil she never touched, lighting up kids she never met. And yet her presence was everywhere. In a Seattle workshop, a mural of Luciana stretched across the back wall, painted by a group of teens who never met her, but called her the woman who saw the quiet kids. Above her portrait were the words Mia had once said, "You don't have to be loud to matter." Mia and Luca's names were whispered in the corners of these rooms like folklore. The girl who drew dreams and the boy who once flinched at touch now stood as symbols of what healing looked like in motion. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the Albuquerque sky, Keanu stood in the original garden outside the first workshop. The air was dry and cool. The orange light hit the metal wind chimes Mia had installed the week before. Each one bore the name of a kid who had found their voice in the program. He looked out and saw children running, laughing, building tiny paper structures, some failing, some standing. It was messy and beautiful, just like life. A volunteer approached with a clipboard asking if he wanted to review the grant proposal for the new Chicago branch. Keanu smiled and shook his head. "Let's give it to Mia and Luca. They'll know what it needs." Later that week, he found a box waiting on the porch of his cabin. Inside was a hand-bound book, pages filled with letters from children across the country. Each one began the same way. "Dear Luciana." He sat down, opened the first page, and read, "I used to think I was too broken to be fixed, but now I think maybe I'm just different, and different is okay." The words blurred slightly as his eyes filled. Luciana had left this world with questions, but the answers were unfolding every day. Broken things still shine sometimes even brighter than before. The room was quiet. Not empty, just hushed in that sacred kind of stillness that follows something deeply meaningful. Mia stood at the far end of the workshop's central hallway, a box of new kits beside her. Outside, dusk wrapped the sky in soft purples. The lights overhead flickered on, not with harsh brightness, but with a gentle warmth like the kind her mother used to keep on in the kitchen after midnight. The communicator sat in her palm, small, round, worn on one side from how often her fingers brushed it absent-mindedly. It had been her idea years ago during the first expansion phase, a simple button that lit up another one across the room. No words, no attention-seeking, just a signal, "I see you." Some of the younger kids called it the quiet high five. Others never gave it a name. They just pressed it when they were overwhelmed or proud or unsure or afraid. They pressed it when they didn't know how to say thank you or help me or I'm glad you're here. Luca had helped her build the prototype. He didn't talk much back then, still a little shy from all the early days when his voice wasn't trusted. But he listened. He always listened. And when she explained the idea to him, he just nodded and started sketching. Now every workshop had a set. Mia turned the communicator over in her hand. A group of kids were still finishing their afternoon projects on the other side of the room, huddled over a pile of cardboard and glowing wire. A volunteer laughed. Someone dropped a screwdriver. It was the sound of safety, the music of normal days after long storms. Her eyes wandered to the photo framed beside the door. It was of Luciana, smiling hands outstretched, welcoming a child with mud-covered hands and a paper rocket. The caption below had been written by Keanu after the dedication ceremony in Portland. Some people build homes out of bricks. Others build them out of kindness. Mia stepped to the side of the room where her bag sat and retrieved a small notepad. She had scribbled something earlier that day during a lull, a reflection, a kind of final note. She read it aloud now, under her breath, just for herself. The world saw scandal, but we saw love, healing hope. She didn't need to say more. The noise had passed. The pain had transformed. She looked up across the workshop. Luca sat at the far bench, guiding a young girl through the wiring of her solar lantern. His posture was more relaxed now. His hands moved with quiet confidence, and his mouth formed soft, steady words. No longer silent, no longer scared, just present. Mia smiled and pressed the communicator. Across the room, Luca's device lit up. He glanced down at the glow, then up at her. Their eyes met for a moment, no performance, no explanation, just acknowledgement. Signal sent. You are not alone. Luca gave a small nod and smiled, not the awkward smile he used to wear like armor, but a real one, easy, genuine. Then he turned back to the girl beside him, guiding her with a quiet grace that reminded Mia so much of Luciana. The way he paused to let her think, the way he let her finish the circuit on her own, even if it took a little longer. That, Mia thought, was the gift. She walked toward the doorway as the sun dipped lower outside. From this angle, she could see the mural that wrapped around the entrance, a swirling cascade of stars and cracked mirrors painted by dozens of the program's kids over the years. Every shard had a message scrawled beneath it in gold. You matter. You are not your worst moment. Broken things still shine. It had started with one sentence written by a boy who'd once been expelled from 3 schools and thought no one would ever trust him with anything again. Now he was a welder, a good one, and he came back every fall to help install the solar panels on the new buildings. She ran her fingers along the edge of the paint, tracing the words. Keanu had never tried to be the hero of the story. He just showed up again and again and let others step forward. He'd held silence when it was needed, spoke when it mattered, built without needing credit. Mia remembered watching him during those early days, hammering together benches and loading toolkits into trucks. He'd told her once, "I'm not here to fix anyone, just to remind them they're not forgotten." That was what this place had become. Not a center, not a charity, a signal tower, a place that whispered through every open door. "We see you." Mia stepped outside where the twilight wind carried a gentle coolness. A mother stood near the curb waiting for her son to finish. She turned when she saw Mia and offered a quiet smile. "This place saved my child," she said softly. Mia didn't need to ask which one. She just nodded and replied the way Keanu had taught them all to answer when words felt too heavy. "That's why we built it." She looked up at the sky. No spotlight, no applause, just stars old and fractured and still shining. And now to you, the viewer. If you've ever known someone who just needed to be seen, someone who wasn't broken, but simply unheard, tell us. Maybe it was a friend, a sibling, maybe it was you. Because sometimes all it takes is one person to press the button and say, "I'm here." Leave us a comment below, share your story, And if this story moved you, let us know what kind of story you'd like to see Keanu in next. One small act, one unseen moment. That's where change begins. Until next time, remember, you are not alone. Broken things still shine. Broken things.